going, everyone? Today is June 10th of 2024. In today's video, we're going to turn the clock back 3 days to June 7th and talk about the numerology and synchronicity of 3 major news stories from that date. Early in the morning, we learned that the Jake Paul-Mike Tyson fight would be rescheduled to November, originally scheduled for July 20th, the anniversary of the moon landing, but now pushed back due to a medical scare from Mike Tyson. June 7th was also the date that Wheel of Fortune aired its final episode featuring Pat Sajak as the host. Sajak, the show's host for over 40 years. Later that night, we got another news story that Apollo 8 astronaut Bill Anders died in a plane crash at the age of 90. So throughout this video, we'll use numerology with a particular emphasis on Gematria to explain how all of these news stories are coordinated together by a strict numerical code. The ciphers seen on your screen here are the ones that I teach in every single one of my major videos. And when you compare this language to the calendar, you find that something strange indeed is going on in this world. So first off, early in the morning on June 7th, we learned that the Jake Paul and Mike Tyson fight was rescheduled. A few weeks ago, I made a video on the numerology of the Jake Paul and Mike Tyson fight and how it was all synced up with the first moon landing with Neil Armstrong, the first astronaut from Apollo 11 to reportedly set foot on the moon. So this video, along with a couple of other related videos, is linked down below in the description. Well, on June 7th, again, the same date as Pat Sajak's final episode. So I began reviewing the numerology of Sajak's last episode, and I realized it had everything to do with the same moon riddle as the Paul and Tyson fight. So I did a whole post on the numerology here, which we'll review shortly. Sajak, the host of Wheel of Fortune, which is one of the 22 trump cards in the Tarot's major arcana. Now, the Tarot has been a theme of this channel for a couple of months now, in particular through The Tower. Last month, May 3rd, a film called Tarot was released, and this is a clue to many of the riddles playing out in the mainstream. Now, what I realized when doing this is that Pat Sajak has an alarming number of connections numerically to the 9/11 code, all connected to the destruction of the World Trade Center, which was a major tower riddle in itself. So we'll look at this post as well, but I couldn't really understand why Pat Sajak was so synced up with the Tower and the World Trade Center. Well, later that night, on June 7th, we learned about the death of Apollo 8 astronaut Bill Anders in a plane crash. And suddenly, this all started to make sense to me. Now, an interesting fact about Pat Sajak that will help bring this riddle together is that one of Sajak's first jobs was as a disc jockey in the Vietnam War for the American Forces Network. In fact, he hosted the same radio show that Adrian Cronauer hosted, which was famously signed on with the phrase, "Good Morning Vietnam." Well, this stood out immediately to me, because in 1987, a film named Good Morning Vietnam was released, starring Robin Williams. And although Williams died before I started doing Gematria videos, I have done a few posts explaining how his life and death was completely connected to this moon riddle. Robin Williams was born on July 21st. July 21st is the same date in history that Neil Armstrong is said to have set foot on the moon. In Gematria, the name Armstrong has matching 118 Gematria with moon landing. The word Cancer also sums to 118, and the moon landing ended the time of Cancer on the zodiac. Cancer, the only sign ruled by the moon. Well, this Jake Paul and Mike Tyson fight is in Dallas, Texas, which also equals 118. And the fight was delayed by 118 days. Robin Williams died on the 11th of August, the date that can be written 11/8. So all of this points to a significant moon riddle. And think about how the moon is an average of 238,000 miles from Earth. Well, Robin Williams died just a couple months after the United States turned 238 years old. Actually, just 1 month after that. So we'll also show how all of this has a strong riddle to Robin Williams. Let's get started by looking at the numerology of Pat Sajak and his retirement from Wheel of Fortune. In the tarot, the Wheel of Fortune card is number 10 for the major arcana. When you write out Wheel of Fortune X as the Roman numeral appears, you get an ordinal value of 197. Wheel of Fortune was filmed in the Los Angeles, California area, which is a city with 197 Gematria, and in the satanic form of Gematria, which is a cipher that's cleverly built around the number 666. The word moon, also 197. 197 is the 45th prime number, divisible only by 1 and itself. Well, on the date of Sajak's final episode, he was exactly a span of 4,050 weeks old. The date of the final episode with Pat Sajak had numerology of both 57 and 21. This is achieved by simply adding the digits in the date together, 6 plus 7 plus 20 plus 24, all of these digits individually. In both ordinal and reduction or Pythagorean gematria, the word moon sums to both 57 and 21. Now, Pat Sajak started on Wheel of Fortune back in the year 1981. The show was then moved to a nighttime slot in 1983. Those two debut episodes for Pat Sajak were separated by exactly 90 weeks on the calendar. This is also 20 months and 23 days. These are both numbers associated with the moon, which sums to 90 in English ordinal, and also 223 in standard Hebrew gematria. 90 is also the age that Bill Anders died at, the Apollo 8 astronaut, dead at the age of 90 years old. And although Bill Anders was not part of any of the Apollo crews that walked on the moon, he did reportedly visit the moon as Apollo 8 orbited and took pictures of the Earth. William Anders is actually best known for taking this photo called Earthrise, which was taken on Christmas Eve of 1968. This whole Christmas riddle is another part of this theme. When Pat Sajak worked in Vietnam, he famously botched President Richard Nixon's Christmas broadcast to the troops, accidentally cutting the feed prematurely. Well, Pat Sajak's first television gig was in the city of Nashville. You'll see this several times in his Wikipedia. Nashville, Tennessee. Well, back in 2020, there was a bombing in Nashville, Tennessee on Christmas Day. And notably, the film Good Morning Vietnam was released 2 days before Christmas. So the Wheel of Fortune is the 10th card of the tarot. And notice how Wheel of Fortune and 10th card both share gematria values of 408. Well, this year, 408, April 8th, was a very significant date for the moon, as the moon covered the sun in the United States of America, causing a total solar eclipse. Now, feel free to check out my Superstream 61, which I will link below in the description, to learn how this eclipse was all connected to the Skull and Bones Yale University riddle. Skull and Crossbones has gematria of 61, matching Wheel of Fortune 61. Pat Sajak's final episode was a span of 61 days after this eclipse. Last year, I made a video on the numerology of Bob Barker, who died at the age of 99. Now, in reverse, the moon equals 99, and everything about Bob Barker was all synced up with the moon. That's another video linked below. 61 is also the ordinal value of the astronaut who died on the same date, Anders, summing to 61 in ordinal. The 61st prime number is 283, and in Latin gematria, the moon sums to 283, a lot like total solar eclipse with capital letters. Now, quite frequently, we talk about ages in relation to months, but not the classical month we're used to on the Gregorian calendar, but either a synodic or a sidereal month, which is a little bit shorter than the 30 or 31 day month that we're accustomed to. Now, one lunar phase or synodic month, 29.5 days. Well, on the lunar calendar, for instance, the Islamic calendar, one lunar year is 12 lunar phases. So this comes out to 11 days shorter than our typical year. Well, it just so happens that Pat Sajak died on his lunar birthday, as he would have been exactly 80 lunar years old on the date of his final episode. Wheel of Fortune host, summing to 80 as well. He was also 1,037 sidereal months old on this date, and in reverse, the name Pat Sajak sums to 137. His name also equals the 150th prime number, which points to moon in reverse as well. But then I realized that this all syncs up with the 9/11 attacks, which we will explore in depth. Sajak's final episode was 272 months and 27 days after the attacks of 9/11. Pat Sajak has gematria of 272. Using capital letters, these ciphers maintain the alphabetic order, but either mix or add capital letters. The name Bob Barker also sums to 272. And as I explained in that video, this is a number connected to the geometry of the moon, which is 0.272 the width of the Earth. Now, the name Pat sums to 271, which is very close. His birth name, also 271 with capital letters. Well, in reverse, Good Morning Vietnam is 271. And on the same date, astronaut Bill Anders dies. Both Bill Anders and Anders equal 271. Using the alphabetic order, Bill Anders equals 96. Well, not only was Pat Sajak exactly 80 lunar years old, but 80 lunar years comes out to exactly 960 lunar phases. 960 lunations old on the date he retired, syncing up perfectly with Bill Anders. So let's quickly peek at how the numerology of Sajak is connected to the Tower Riddle before we talk more about the astronaut. June 7th this year, a leap year, was the 159th day on the calendar. The World Trade Center shares 159 Gematria with September 11th. When Robin Williams died 10 years ago, it was 159 lunar phases after 9/11. 911 is the 156th prime number. The name Robin Williams sums to 156 in the alphabetic order. With capital letters, Pat Sajak shares this gematria, 156. The number 33 is also 156 in ordinal, and it was 33 years from construction to destruction of the World Trade Center. The World Trade Center, also called the Twin Towers, which sums to 330 with capital letters. When the show Wheel of Fortune first premiered all the way back in 1975, that was exactly 330 lunar phases before the destruction of the Twin Towers. And the Twin Towers are represented in the tarot through the Tower card, where we have people falling from the tower as it's burning, just like 9/11. When we talk about Bill Anders, we're going to talk about the Millennium Lunation number. The tower sums to 1248 in Latin. And notice how Pat Sajak retired 1,248 days after the January 6th incident at the United States Capitol. January 6th is relevant here because the date is written 1/6, and the tower is the 16th card of the tarot. The name Pat Sajak equals 16 in reduction. And Wheel of Fortune first debuted on the date January 6th, or 1/6. In fact, Pat Sajak was born exactly 16 weeks after George W. Bush, who was the president during 9/11. The World Trade Center even opened 160 days after Sajak's birthday. His birth name, Patrick Sajak, sums to 124, just like 16th. United States Capitol also summing to the 16th Fibonacci number. Astronaut Bill Anders was 33,106 days old for his plane crash. We just talked about 33 and then 16. Sajak's retirement was also 1,060 lunar phases after Adrian Cronauer was born. Cronauer, the DJ that Sajak followed in Vietnam. So Pat Sajak was born in the year 46. And notice how 46 is the abbreviation for World Trade Center, WTC. The January 6th incursion was exactly 46 years after the debut of Wheel of Fortune. But I want to talk about another alignment here, from January 6th of 75 to January 6th of 2021. So not only do we get an exact number of years, 46, but we also get exact number of lunar phases and sidereal months. This 615 immediately stood out because 615 is the area code in the city of Nashville where Pat Sajak got his start. And how lovely. I'm having mouse issues during this live stream. I replaced the battery, but still having problems. Oh, great. Hang with me for a minute, guys, while I try and figure out what the hell's going on with my electronics. You know, I finally spent money on a nice mouse. And, all right, we're back. So this number 615, with that distraction out of the way, June 7th was exactly 615 weeks after the death of Neil Armstrong, the first man to walk on the moon. 615 is the only number in Latin Gematria that sums to 911. 911 found in Sajak's age for January 6th. And a number we see stamped throughout much of this Gematria. Wheel of Fortune debuted 643 days after the World Trade Center opened, and that was during Brown Lunation 643. We'll talk more about the Brown Lunation system once we get into Bill Anders here. Now, of course, the reason that this tarot riddle is so important recently is because these are trump cards, the Tower and Wheel of Fortune. And on May 30th, Trump became the first U.S. president to ever be convicted of a crime. Donald John Trump has matching 185 Gematria with World Trade Center and Solomon's Temple. Pat Sajak's final episode of Wheel of Fortune aired 18,050 days after the show's premiere in 1975. This is also 611 lunar phases and 6 days, which has an upside down 9119. There's also a couple of interesting World Trade Center alignments. The show debuted 10,300 days after Sajak was born, and his first appearance at night was 13,477 days after his birth. All of these digits found in World Trade Center. So next up, let's talk about Bill Anders and how his numbers sync up perfectly with all of this. And once again, this riddle pours through the movie Good Morning Vietnam, which was loosely based on the story of DJ Adrian Cronauer, the man that Pat Sajak succeeded in Vietnam. The name Adrian Joseph Cronauer sums to 1290 in Sumerian Gematria. This cipher, also mentioned in every one of my videos, simply multiplies the alphabetic order by 6, the first perfect number, and a very strong moon number as well. Well, the phrase Good Morning Vietnam also sums to 1290. How appropriate. Astronaut William Anders sums to 1209 in Latin. And when Anders died, it was exactly 1,029 months after Adrian Cronauer was born. Bill Anders' birthday is 10/17, October 17th. When Cronauer died back in 2018, he had just turned 1,017 months old. He was also on an exact sidereal count, 1,133 sidereal months. This syncs up with the lunation number Anders was born under, lunation 133. Cronauer died 2,151 days before Bill Anders. When Wheel of Fortune premiered, Bill Anders was exactly 2,151 weeks old. This also syncs up with Robin Williams, who portrayed Cronauer in the film. The name Robin Williams equals 195. Williams was 1,900 weeks and 5 days old when this movie came out. And in reverse Sumerian, Adrian Joseph Cronauer is 1950. So strong alignments between these three men. But what really sets this riddle off is the number 302. Now, why would that be? Well, Bill Anders died on June 7th. June 7th is the date in history that the Boeing 777 was first put into commission. And this is appropriate as Anders died in a plane crash. Well, on June 7th, Former President Barack Obama was 777 lunar phases and 7 days old. Meaning on the date of the Trump conviction, he was exactly 777 lunar phases old. Now, as we saw earlier, the Tower card of the tarot has lightning. Right? There's lightning striking the tower. The name Barack actually means lightning. I don't have the Wikipedia page up this, but you can look this up yourself. Barack means lightning. Notice how the name Barack Obama and Obama both share 32 gematria with Leo, which is Obama's birth sign. When you write out 777, it sums to 3020 in Latin gematria. Now, this brings us to the lunation numbers that I've been referring to. Ever since the year 1923, every new moon has been numbered. From January 17th of 1923. However, there's an auxiliary system called the Millennium Lunation Number. So, the Millennium Lunation, which for some reason has been taken out of Wikipedia, that's interesting. This system, however, looks at the first new moon of the current millennium. And appropriately, this happened on January 6th, 1/6. So, the Millennium Lunation number subtracts 953. Well, if you measure from this first new moon of the millennium to the plane crash for Bill Anders, you get exactly 302 lunar phases, meaning he died on the first date of Millennium Lunation, 302, syncing up with Barack Obama and 777. Well, this is not the first time I've talked about the number 302 with plane crashes. Back in 2019, Ethiopian Flight 302 crashed in Addis Ababa. And I have this post linked along with all of this information. The previous year, in 2018, we had another plane crash on the 302nd day of the year. This was a Lion Air flight. And I did a post talking about how this flight was connected to Barack Obama. Bill Anders died 302 days after the anniversary of Robin Williams' death. And notice how Robin Williams would have been exactly 302 mercurial years old. Mercury, the Roman god of transportation and travelers, which is, of course, always relevant to riddles with 9/11. Pretty much everything to do with 9/11 was all synced up with the planet Mercury. Remember, the World Trade Center had 2 communication towers on top of it, which transmitted messages, sometimes across boundaries. And then we had thieves stealing airplanes and bashing them into 2 towers. And of course, there was a lot of media trickery on that date as well. Robin Williams' full name also has these digits, 320. Bill Anders even died 97 days after the date 302. And 97 is the number of plane crash and death. But I want to share something else with this, because this is going to tie into part of the eclipse riddle. Bill Anders snapped this photo, Earthrise, which is, I guess the most famous picture of Earth ever taken from space. This image was snapped exactly 302 years after the Christmas hybrid eclipse of the year 1666, which is truly one of the most fascinating eclipses in the canon. And we'll talk about this more in a little bit. When Flight 302 crashed in 2019, it was exactly 210 months after 9/11. Well, Bill Anders' full name sums to 210, just like the word moon. When you write out 302 in reduction, it sums to 80. And remember, Pat Sajak was exactly 80 lunar years old for his retirement. Boeing originally founded during Brown lunation -80. Bill Anders was 80 years old when Robin Williams died. And Wheel of Fortune even debuted 80 sidereal months after the Earthrise photo. Now, whenever we talk about Mercury, I usually refer to John F. Kennedy. And there's a pretty good reason for this. JFK, the last president to be assassinated, died on his mercurial birthday. He was exactly 193 mercurial years old. The name John F. Kennedy sums to 193. So does assassinated. 193. Well, JFK was born in the year 1917. This is the square number gematria of Mercury. Bill Anders died 1,917 days after Flight 302 crashed. JFK was born 1,917 days after the FAA was founded. The FAA, the governing body of airplanes. And look at JFK's age for June 7th this year, 107 years and 9 days old. This is the Latin gematria of Williams, 1079. Now, those of you who are fond of my Formula One decodes lately, Williams is the name of one of the 10 teams in F1. And I thought it was interesting that yesterday, for the race in Canada, both Williams cars crashed out. Now, Williams has been crashing in almost every race, so that's not that amazing, but I kind of expected this. I told a couple of my friends to look for it, and sure enough, that happened. Now, granted, I did think that they might crash into a McLaren, because Robin Williams' middle name is McLaurin, which is very close to McLaren. But that's not the case. They crashed into a Ferrari, so half right, half wrong as usual. I mentioned the number 159 a couple times earlier. Robin Williams dead 159 lunar phases after 9/11. Well, Adrian Cronauer died 15,900 days after Wheel of Fortune premiered. And Cronauer was born 159 lunar phases before Robin Williams. So I mentioned earlier how there's a bit of an eclipse riddle with the Great American Eclipse, but this riddle actually goes way deeper. The number 159 has gematria of 1666. In the year 1666, there was a rather incredible hybrid solar eclipse. This is one of my favorite eclipses that I've ever come across. And there were actually two hybrid eclipses in 1666, which is so rare I can't even believe it happened. But this eclipse started as, let's see, it would have started as an annular eclipse, and then it morphed into a total eclipse, and then morphed back into an annular eclipse towards the end. And there's almost a perfect line of symmetry with the globe here. Now, this eclipse belonged to Solar Saros 136. Now, Solar Saros 136 is the one that's connected to the Jesuits. Here we see the Christmas Day 1666 hybrid eclipse. But notice how September 30th of 1540, well, 3 days before that date, September 27th of 1540, is when the Jesuits were founded. The Jesuits sums to 136 in the alphabetic order. The Jesuit symbol, very similar to an eclipsed sun, of course. Well, Solar Saros 136 began in the year 1360, and in the Western Hemisphere, the date was 13/6, the 13th of June. And just to display how important this Saros series is if you go to 2009, the most recent eclipse, this one passed directly over the city of Wuhan, China, which is where we're told coronavirus originated. And the sun's corona is only visible during a total eclipse. So this is a window into all of the major riddles of the mainstream. On the date June 7th, the Jesuit order was 176,666 days old. This quadruple 6 alignment only happens once every 10,000 days. So this is a very strong connection here. 17,666. Robin Williams died 999 lunar phases after Bill Anders was born. And look at this. My mouse went out on me again. All right, guys, brief 1-minute intermission while I grab my other mouse and keyboard. Hang tight. All right, just a couple seconds here. All right, we're moving again. Sorry about that, guys. So we get the upside down 666 here. Well, measuring from the birth of Robin Williams to Bill Anders' Earthrise photo, 6,366 days. And then Robin Williams died 16,660 days after that. 16,666 days. This is a number I actually talked about not that long ago. Because for the eclipse over the United States this year, this would have been Kobe Bryant's age. 16,666. But this same measurement is also 2,380 weeks. Robin Williams died just after the U.S. turned 238 years old. The number 666 has gematria of 2,038, which connects to the distance from the Earth to the Moon. Bill Anders' Earthrise photo, taken all the way back in '68, the same year that Pat Sajak started in Vietnam, that photo turns 666 months later this month, on the 24th. And Bill Anders died 18 days earlier, and that's the sum of 666. Also, when Neil Armstrong stepped foot on the moon, it was exactly 18 years after Robin Williams was born. That's also 216 months. And 216 is 6 times 6 times 6. The moon, 2,160 miles across at the equator. Robin McLaurin Williams and Robin Williams both share 247 gematria with World Trade Center. And Robin Williams was born exactly 247 weeks after Pat Sajak. This is also 1,730 days. Plane crash, 173. The incident that claimed Anders' life. As always, these blog posts are linked below, so if you want to read a little bit more than what I talk about in these videos, please feel free to do that. Again, this all happening on a date with 57 and 21 numerology like moon. When Good Morning Vietnam was released, Bill Anders was 670 lunar phases old and 67 days after his birthday. Dead on 6/7. He was also 67 years old for the 9/11 attacks. Meanwhile, Pat Sajak was born on 10/26, and 9/11 was 10 months and 26 days after Anders' birthday. When he died, it was 20,255 days after his famous photo. He died at the start of Brown Lunation, 1255. When he took that photo, Adrian Cronauer was exactly 405 sidereal months old. Remember Pat Sajak retiring at 4,050 weeks old, in alignment I talked about earlier. Wheel of Fortune X is the 45th prime number, but this 197 is also significant to the moon for another reason. And this connects to the Metonic Cycle. The Metonic Cycle is a period of 19 years which syncs up almost perfectly with 235 synodic months. This means that on the lunisolar calendar, every 19 years, 7 of them have a 13th month. And Metonic Cycle equals 197, just like 19 years and 13th month. The Metonic Cycle is credited to Meton of Athens. Both Meton and Athens sums to 67. And again, all of this occurring on June 7th, 6/7. 67 is the 19th prime number. And again, the Metonic Cycle, a period of just about exactly 19 years. Good Morning Vietnam came out a span of exactly 19 years after Bill Anders' Earthrise photo. Flight 302 crashed exactly 19 mercurial years after Robin Williams died, and also 235 days after Adrian Cronauer died, the man he portrayed in the film. And the Metonic Cycle, 235 lunar phases. Flight 302 crashed exactly 2,305 weeks after Wheel of Fortune debuted. And now Bill Anders died a span of 235 days after his birthday. The name Williams gives us 235, just like the number 159, which we dissected earlier. Bill Anders has a lot of interesting 9/11 syncs with Flight 302. I think most of this stuff I've pretty much gone over. I'll go ahead and, once again, all these posts are linked below, so if you want to see a little bit more. But before I make this video too long, I want to finish up by talking about this Jake Paul and Mike Tyson fight and why it was moved to November 15th. In most parts of the world, this date is written 1511. Well, when you write out the names Paul and Tyson, you get 1511 in standard Gematria. Boxing match equals 550 and 55, and this match was originally going to take place on the 55th anniversary of the moon landing by Apollo 11 with Neil Armstrong, all 55. But as I mentioned, it's now been moved 118 days later, matching Dallas, Texas, moon landing, Armstrong, and Cancer. The reason this fight was delayed was because of a medical emergency, which sums to the 118th prime number. This is a major pi riddle, and remember on September 11th of 2001, the same day as the terror attacks, this book called Life of Pi was published, and this was later turned into a movie in 2012. The Paul and Tyson fight will now take place 20,207 days after the moon landing with Neil Armstrong. The fight will be 227 days before Tyson's birthday, and it'll be 1 day after he turned 722 lunar phases old. In ancient Hebrew, the United States of America sums to 227. So does total eclipse, 227. Well, why is this connected to pi? Well, on a calculator, 22 divided by 7 is the smallest equation to give you the first 3 digits of pi, 3.14. And in Gematria, 22 divided by 7 equals 314. The word eclipse is 314 satanic, and this fight will now be 31 weeks and 4 days after the eclipse. When Neil Armstrong died, it was 31 weeks and 4 days after Jake Paul's birthday. This is also 221 days. Pi riddle equals 221 in standard. But notice how in the base ciphers, pi riddle has multiple matching numbers with both Jake Paul and Mike Tyson, including the numbers 77. And this fight will be 7 months and 7 days after the eclipse. Boxing equals 408. The eclipse was on 408. Jake Paul was 1,698 days old for September 11th. 1,698 is also the Latin gematria of Society of Jesus, who once again use the eclipsed sun, the circle, as their logo. Well, notice how pi equals 16, while 3.14 equals 98. Neil Armstrong moon landing equals 1698 as well. So what about the numbers 119 or 911? Notice how the name Tyson equals 119 with capitals added. 119 is 7 times 17. And on the date of the fight, Tyson will be 700 months and 17 days old. If you include the end date, this fight was delayed by 119 days. When Tyson had his medical emergency, it was 30 minutes before landing. Notice how the digits in the gematria of 30 minutes can be translated to the date September 11th of 01, either on the Gregorian or the Roman calendar. September 11th sums to 1260. This fight will now take place during Brown lunation 1260. In fact, Neil Armstrong would have been 1260 sidereal months old. The date of the fight, November 15th, also reflects the digits in 9/11/2001. Boxing match equals 116. That's an upside down 9/11. And if you watched my video on the Jake Paul and Mike Tyson fight, you would have seen that there's also a major skull and bones riddle with all of this. I think these guys were born 302 months and 2 days apart or something like that, maybe 20 days. Well, this fight will now take place 1 year, 1 month, and 6 days after Yale's special 322nd anniversary. And don't forget, the whole 9/11 riddle simply traces back to Tisha B'Av. Remember Tisha B'Av, the Jewish holiday that commemorates the destruction of the 2 temples. And that holiday is celebrated on the 9th day and the 11th month of the Hebrew calendar. When Neil Armstrong first reportedly set foot on the moon, his age has the same numbers as the gematria of the first temple in Hebrew, 1423. That's the 224th prime number, syncing up with the digits in this year, 2024. Jake Paul will be 10,165 days old for this fight. Neil Armstrong equals 165. Jake Paul was born 165 days after Neil Armstrong's 66th birthday. And Neil Armstrong also equals 66. In my original post, I also talked about a ton of 33 connections. Well, now Jake Paul will be 303 days after his birthday, or 333 months and 30 days old. And this is in the Cowboys Stadium. Cowboys equals 33. So yeah, I think I'll wrap this video up here. I've certainly covered enough. I debated whether or not I should make this a super stream. Not that it really matters. But all of these topics, everything happening on June 7th. And hopefully you see why. I mean, this date was so significant, both to the Apollo missions, to the Earthrise photo, and even the origin of the Jesuit order with that massive 666 eclipse riddle. You know, as cool as the basics are, it's really when you dig deep into the astrological riddles that things, in my eyes, become truly fascinating. All right, everybody, that'll do it. As always, check the links in the description below if you want to check out these blog posts or some of the past videos I've made related to this material. Till next time, peace, love, God bless. See ya.